You're traveling through the unknown, a journey beyond the corners of reality, where the shadows whisper and the chill runs deep. Welcome to the dimension where your deepest fears are given form. This is The Midnight Mystery.
Welcome to The Midnight Mystery. In today's episode, we have two short horror stories. There was a knock at the door, and the shadows in my room were moving. In each episode, we delve into the shadowed corners of our existence, bringing you tales of the eerie, the uncanny, and the downright terrifying. From the realms of the supernatural to the depths of the human psyche, no stone is left unturned, no dark secret left hidden. As the clock once again draws near midnight, prepare to embark on another adventure into the uncanny, the eerie, the horrifying, the Midnight Mystery.
It started when I was 6 years old. I was in school. It was the middle of a reading lesson, and I needed to pee badly. At that age, actually, a fair few kids still wet themselves, and I always got paranoid about embarrassing myself in public like that. I stuck my hand up and told Mrs. Zebby that I needed to use the bathroom. After the usual speech about how I should have gone at break, she gave me the key to the disabled access toilet, as it was the closest one to my classroom. It was the middle of fifth period, and the corridors were empty and seemed cavernous to me. I was a short, scrawny thing back then. I sometimes had trouble with doors, especially unlocking them, and I fumbled for a good minute or two in trying to get the blasted thing open. Anyway, as I sat on my porcelain throne, there came a knocking at the door. "Someone's in here," I called, disgruntled at this disturbance. There came a pause. Then the knocking resumed. It was faster now, more determined. "Wait a minute." The knocking slowed, and a voice replied, "Let me in. I need to come inside." The speaker's tone was thin and reedy, an adult I didn't recognize. I may have been 6, but I also had a fairly good understanding of bathroom etiquette. Mainly that you didn't let more than one person into an area only slightly larger than a cupboard. "Go away." The knocking intensified again until it was a frantic drumbeat, just a few feet from me and out of sight. I heard the voice shouting something, growing more and more desperate. "Let me in. Just open the door, please." I was terrified by that point. The hammering and yelling was so loud, and yet nobody had come to investigate it. Eventually my teacher came to find me, angry because I had been gone almost half an hour. When I refused to open the door to let her in, she got a spare key from the receptionist and then took me to the headmaster's office and called my parents. I was suspended for the rest of the week. I never told anyone what happened. It was a few weeks before my next encounter with this phenomenon. I had just celebrated my 7th birthday, and my family were having a barbecue in my honor. It was a gloriously sunny day, but as soon as we'd set everything up in the allotments behind our house, the coal refused to light. My dad asked me to go and get some fire starters from the shed in the front garden. It was pretty cramped inside, and I wouldn't fit all the way, so I just opened it up, stood on tiptoes to reach the shelf holding my objective, then shut the door. As I turned away, a frantic knocking hit the other side of the door. "Open up, I need to come through." This voice was not the one I'd heard the month before. It was deeper, more brooding and angry. I said nothing and hurried away. I had no idea what was happening, but it frightened me. As I walked away, there came a final thump, like a fist being slammed against wood, and I heard his voice again. "You little bastard. I'll rip your fucking teeth out. Let me through." I ran back to my party and spent the rest of the day glancing over my shoulder. As you might have guessed by now, there were a lot of these voices. I count at least 30, total. Every month or so, I used to get them, pleading to be let through doors. Almost always, it would be immediately after I shut the door behind me, as though these strange entities had been following me. I never told anyone, but to be honest, I kinda just got used to it. It always made me jump, and some of the voices would make me feel uneasy, but I knew that I was safe, so long as I did not open the door. Some of the voices I got used to the extent that I even named them. There was one which always used to appear at my front door at home. We have frosted glass, and I could see a silhouette of an average-sized man wearing a cap of some kind. He never spoke, but occasionally would push envelopes containing blank pieces of paper through the letterbox. I called him the postman. He was one of the more unsettling ones. If I tried to speak to him, he would look up, sharply, then begin knocking. I generally left the postman alone. 20 years on, and I have retained as much normality as possible. I have plenty of friends, and I even have an on and off relationship with a girl I met last year. Not bad for a guy who wakes up in the middle of the night and listens intently to noises you can't hear on the other side of the door. Yeah, my buddies think I'm strange and kooky, but they put up with it. They're all great, I'll miss them. You see, things have started to get strange. Well, stranger than usual, I suppose. 3 weeks ago, I awoke, sweating and crying, though I do not know why. My dream had been, from what I recall, fairly normal, when a huge shadow had abruptly fallen over everything. Literally, the second I opened my eyes, there came the knocking at my bedroom door. Not just normal knocking, though. This was truly frantic. "Who goes there?" I yelled. Please, help us," it replied. I was surprised. It was the sadistic, angry voice that I remember from my father's shed on my 7th birthday, but it seemed genuinely sincere. There was a pain tone to it too, as though the speaker were grievously wounded. I actually found myself pulling back the sheets to get up, but I hesitated. I had never before been tempted to open the door. I suppose, as a child, I had so rigorously drummed into my head the idea that whatever lay beyond was evil, that it was just common sense. To be quite honest, I came very close to letting the thing into my room that morning. I held out in the end. It got worse. Just 2 days later, I was in my local corner shop. I'd just paid for a bottle of milk and a newspaper when a great force slammed against the shop door. Simultaneously, a voice began screaming, a long, keening squeal of pain. I whirled to face the door, but there were so many flyers plastered over the glass that I could only just make out the shape of a woman on the other side, slapping her palms against the window. The shopkeeper stared at me, as though I were crazy. In the end, I asked if he had a bathroom I could use, murmured some half-thought-out excuse, and hid there for 10 minutes until the screaming stopped. There were 4 more incidents between then and now, a mixture of screams and tearful begging. The postman stopped by yesterday too. He knocked politely before sliding his usual letter through the letterbox. Then another, a total of 10 plain brown envelopes. The postman waited for a few minutes, knocking occasionally, and then he left me alone. Each letter contained a sheet of A4 paper, but somebody had taken a black pen to the pages, scribbling and shading them with such vigor that there were large tears around the center, and the edges were frayed. I shoved them back into their envelopes and tried to put it from my mind. Earlier, my bedroom door shook violently. It wasn't a scream or a howl or a roar that I heard, though. It was just crying. Dozens and dozens of voices, sobbing quietly. Another blow struck my door. Plaster flaked from the walls and twirled to the carpet. Still no pleas or bargaining, just sobbing. Crash. I jumped up from my chair. Crash. A hairline crack split the frame of the door in one corner. My phone began to ring, and I heard a sharp rapping at the glass of my window behind the curtains. I tried answering the phone, but it was simply yet more voices crying. Not even sobbing, though, more like bawling in terror and anguish. I hung up, but it kept ringing, so I took the battery out. I have shoved most of my furniture against the door and window. It has been 3 hours since this latest attempt at entry began. The battering has not abated, nor has the crying. I'm fairly sure that my door won't hold much longer. As for my mediocre barricade, it could be swept aside in 2 minutes. I find myself faced with the very real possibility of death, so I'm writing this memoir of sorts, just in case something does happen. Crash. What do they want? Crash. Do they even want to hurt me? Crash. They seemed fearless, even malicious before. Crash. What could have driven them to this? Crash. Maybe I should open the door. Crash. Maybe I should let them in. Silence fell. I realized that even the crying had ceased. For a whole minute, I sat there. Then I got up and hurried to my door, eager to escape this claustrophobic situation. Perhaps I'd go outside, where I could be far away from any doors and from the damned knocking. I pulled away my barricade and turned the handle. Locked. Kneeling, I peered through the keyhole. Beyond my bedroom door was not the corridor that I remembered, but another room. Some kind of library or classroom, I think. It seemed unoccupied, but for one kid, sitting and reading with his back to me. I banged on the door. "Hey kid, let me out, okay?" He glanced over his shoulder. "Yeah, over here. Could you open the door, please?" "I can't, I'm in detention. I'm not supposed to talk to anyone. Go away." He turned from me. Confused and exasperated, I began to stand up. A loud bang shattered the silence once more. I realized it sounded like a fist being pounded against glass. "My window," I heard it again. But this was not the frantic knocking of somebody wanting to get inside. This was not even an attempt to break in. Whatever was beyond the curtain and glass knew I was inside. It knew I was frightened. In the most predatory and sadistic way possible, it wanted me to be afraid. I turned back to the door and began hammering on it frantically. "Hey, let me in, okay? I really need you to open the door."
This is a story about something that happened to me a couple of years ago. I'm not too sure what happened or how to explain it, but I guess I'll just start and see what you think. So I was up late binging that new show everyone's talking about. It must have been around 1 a.m. when the power flickered. Not unusual, right? Except it came back with this eerie, dim glow, not quite full power. My phone was dead, and for some reason it wouldn't charge. Should have been my first red flag. I decided to call it a night, figuring I could get some phone charge in the car the next day. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, and that's when I noticed it. The feeling of being watched. It was so intense I actually turned around, but no one was there. Just shadows. I have this little hallway mirror, and it didn't reflect anything, like the light was too scared to bounce off it. In my room, I shut the door, and I could swear I heard a soft whisper right after the click of the latch. I told myself it was the house settling. I got into bed and closed my eyes, but there was this smell, like wet earth, you know? It was out of place, and I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. That's when I heard it. Scratching. Not like a tree against the window, but deliberate, rhythmic scratching from under my bed. My heart was hammering in my chest, and I was frozen. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I mustered every ounce of courage to peek over the edge of the bed. Nothing there. But the scratching continued, and then a chuckle. A low, guttural laugh that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I jumped back into bed, pulling the covers over my head like a shield. The room grew cold, so cold I could see my breath. I stayed like that for what felt like hours, every nerve on edge until exhaustion took over. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I knew, it was morning. The sunlight felt like the best thing I'd ever seen. Everything seemed normal, but when I went to make the bed, I saw them. Marks on the floor, scratches in the wood that weren't there before, curving and crossing in patterns that made my eyes water if I looked too long. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to stay another night there. It felt too real, too vicious. And the worst part? When I finally plugged my phone into the car charger that morning, there was one new photo in my gallery from last night. It's blurry, and I couldn't make out much, but there's a shape at the edge of my bed, bending over where I was lying. I'm not sure what to do, but I'm not going back tonight. I'm telling you, there's something in that house, and I think it's waiting for the darkness to come back. So, I was staying at a motel, one that was by a highway. But even there, I felt like it followed me. Or maybe it's just my nerves. But that's not even the freaky part. I tried showing the picture to the lady at the front desk, asking if she saw what I saw, but the moment she looked at my phone, it went blank. Dead. Won't turn on, just like at the house. I've been trying to convince myself to go back, just during the day, you know, to grab some clothes and my other stuff. But there was this dread, a feeling in my gut that tells me it's a bad idea. Still, I can't shake off the need to know what's happening. Curiosity is a weird thing, huh? I drove by the house in the morning. Just drove by, didn't stop. And guess what? The front door was wide open. I didn't leave it open. I know I didn't. And there's this part of me that wanted to believe it was just a break-in, that some animal found its way inside, something mundane and explainable. But here's where it gets really messed up. As I slowed down just a bit near the driveway, I could hear that scratching noise again, just faintly, like it was coming from the back of the house. And for a second, just a second, I thought I saw movement behind one of the upstairs curtains, like someone peeking out. I didn't stop, though, kept driving straight to work. But it's like that house, whatever's in there, it was calling out to me. The fear is one thing, but the need to understand, to find out what's going on, is almost as strong. And there's more. That evening, when I came back to the motel, I found dirt on my car's driver's seat. Wet earth, just like the smell in my room that night. but my car was locked all day, and nobody else has the key. I didn't know if I was going crazy or if it was really happening. I kept thinking, maybe I should have gone back with someone else, you know? Strength in numbers and all that. But who would have believed me? Who would have actually come with me to that house after what I'd told them? I didn't know what to do next, but it felt like whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. You wouldn't believe what happened next. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, right? So I called my friend Mark. He was into all that paranormal stuff, so I thought, if anyone would take me seriously, it'd be him. And he did, more than I expected. He was actually excited, said he'd come with me to the house after work. We met up and drove there together. It was just before sunset, that time when the sky turns all sorts of colors, but all I could see was the house looking darker than ever. Mark brought this little digital recorder and a camera, said he wanted to document everything. The door was still open when we got there. My heart had been pounding so hard I thought it would leap out of my chest. But Mark? He just marched in like he was walking into a mall. I followed him, every step feeling heavier than the last. We did a sweep of the downstairs first. Nothing was out of place except for the dirt. It was there again, in small piles like before, scattered in the hallway and by the living room. Mark was muttering to himself, recording every detail. Then we heard it. A thump upstairs. Mark looked at me and I could tell he was thrilled. This was what he had come for. But me, I felt that same ice-cold fear from before. We went upstairs and I swear I didn't want to look, but I did. And the hallway mirror was back to normal, reflecting the dying light from outside. But the scratches on the floor, they were different, rearranged into new patterns that I couldn't make sense of. Mark headed straight for my bedroom, and that's when the scratching noise started. It was loud, and it was right under us. But it was different this time. It was angry. I grabbed Mark's arm, ready to bolt, but he shook me off. He put his camera on the floor, pointing towards the bed, and started asking questions to the empty room. Who are you? What do you want? The standard ghost hunter spiel. And the noises stopped. Just like that. Silence. The tension had been unbearable. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped. We could see our breaths, and I felt a gust of wind, even though all the windows had been shut. Mark had been getting his answers on his recorder, playing it back right there, but all I had heard was static. Until, clear as day, a voice came through the speaker, whispering something that sounded like a name or a word, but it was in reverse, all garbled. We didn't stay much longer after that. It had felt like a warning, like we'd heard what we weren't supposed to. As we left, I looked back at the house from the safety of Mark's car, and there was a light on in my bedroom. I knew we hadn't left any lights on. I knew it. So then, there we were, sitting in that diner, trying to make sense of it all. Mark had been going over the recordings, and I was just trying not to spill my coffee with these shaking hands. I wanted to believe it was over, that whatever wanted our attention had gotten it and now it would move on. But as we had left, I had felt eyes on me. I had felt noticed, acknowledged. And I couldn't help but fear that it wasn't done with us, not by a long shot. Anyway, I didn't think I could ever go back there, not after that night. But I was scared. What if it wasn't about the house? What if it was about me? What was stopping it from following wherever I went? So, after that night at the diner with Mark, things had gotten quiet. Too quiet, you know, like the calm before the storm. I had stayed with my sister for a few nights, hoping that whatever was in that house wouldn't bother to follow me across town. And nothing had happened. No weird smells, no strange noises, no cold spots. I had started to think maybe, just maybe, I had overreacted. Maybe the stress had gotten to me, or it was all in my head. That's what my sister kept saying. And Mark? He had been disappointed there was no more action, said he thought we were on the verge of a real discovery. A week had passed, and life began to feel normal again. I actually laughed at myself for getting so worked up. I had decided to move on, put the house on the market, let it be someone else's problem, or better yet, let it stand empty. But here's the thing. The last night at my sister's place, I had this dream. I was back in the house, but it wasn't the same. It was older, decrepit, like it had been rotting for years. I heard the scratching again, but this time I followed it. It led me to the basement, a place I never liked to go. In the dream, I found an old book on the floor, its pages yellow and the writing in a language I didn't recognize. And that whispering voice was back, but louder, more urgent. I felt hands around my wrist when I tried to pick up the book, cold and solid. I woke up screaming. I hadn't gone back to the house since, not even in daylight. I didn't know what had happened there, if it was real or just some kind of, a haunted hallucination. But after that dream, things had settled down. No more noises, no more whispers, no more dirt. I told myself I was done with that place, that I was moving on. But sometimes when I was drifting off to sleep in my new apartment, which was modern and clean and so very, very normal, I wondered. I wondered about that book in the dream, about the hands that had felt so real. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had left something unfinished there. And Mark, he had gone back once. He said everything was quiet, too quiet, just like for me. He took more recordings, but they came back empty. He had lost interest, said the phenomenon had passed. But I couldn't help but wait, Wait for the other shoe to drop. Because things like this, they don't just end, do they? There's always a catch, a sequel, a next chapter. And deep down, I was afraid that whatever had started at that house wasn't finished with me. Not yet. So, I was trying to live my life, trying to forget. But every time I heard a scratch, even if it was just from the Niebuhr's cat or the wind, I held my breath and I listened. And I wasn't sure what scared me more, the thought that it might come back or the thought that I might actually want it to, just to get some answers. Anyway, that's the story. I still have no idea what the fuck happened, and I never want to find out.
Thank you for joining us at the stroke of midnight, right here at the Midnight Mystery. As the shadows of our tale dissolve into the darkness, we hope it's left you with chills and thrills, echoing in the quiet of the night. Did this story send shivers down your spine, or did it linger in your mind like a half-remembered dream? We're dying to know. Unravel your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own scary experiences, or tell us how tonight's mystery has stirred your imagination. And remember, to never miss a tale from the cryptic corners of the Midnight Mystery, hit the like button as if it's your talisman against the terrors of the night. Subscribe and ring the bell so you'll always be amongst the first to tread the misty path of our next mystery. Until the clock chimes for our next dark encounter, keep your eyes wide open and your mind even wider. Who knows what secrets will unfold when the clock strikes midnight once more. Good night, and let the mysteries of the night embrace you.